this episode of Cultivate. Thank you so much for tuning in once again. Today, we have an amazing conversation. And before we even get started, I just want to thank you once again for your support, for watching, for tuning in. This past week, I was talking to a lot of you, and I love hearing your stories and how much you've loved the podcast. And know that this is a space that we've created for you to be encouraged, to be challenged, to really stir up our faith together as we listen to some of these stories from the amazing guests that have shared with us. And today I have the privilege and the honor of interviewing and sitting down with some of my favorite people ever. They have been part of Alex's and my life for over 10 years, maybe 12, maybe 13, a long time. And since the day that we met them, they've been such an incredible people, family. They're like family to us. We see them as kind of like our parents. They're too young to be our parents, but our parents. And today I have Zori and Luis joining me today for a conversation. Thank you guys so much for saying yes to sharing today.
Thank you so much for having us.
Yes, thank you for having us here.
I love you guys very much. And so today we're going to be talking about marriage. We're going to be talking about real life situations and God's goodness, restoration. And so we're going to get real today.
Uh-oh.
And I know you guys have been married for how long?
37 years.
37 years.
37 years.
That's a long. That's 2 years more than I've been alive.
Yes.
Not trying to make you feel old, but
No, not at all.
and for the people that are just watching that, a lot of people know you from church, but if they don't know you, Louis is our CFO at church, and that's just one of the many things he does. One of the things you do so well is put up with my crazy ideas.
Oh, you're awesome.
And make sure that they come to life. And I know I bother you a lot.
Never.
And Zori, she also is part of our church. She works at church, and she is an incredible voice of wisdom to me. You're the person that, even if you've messed up in the worst way, anyone can go up to you and find grace and love and truth, which is very important, but never feel judged and never feel out of place. So I love you guys. So 37 years. That's what we're
37
here
years.
for. 37 years. Tell me a little bit of like your story. Well, I know you guys have an interesting story, how you
Yes.
met. You guys were very young.
Yes. We were very young, but Louis was even younger. So this is crazy, but we met at a small Spanish church that we used to attend. And Louis was 15.
Well, we met earlier than that.
Well, yeah, I've known
Her
him.
younger brother is my best friend.
Okay.
Growing up all our life. So we've known each other since I was 12.
Yes.
Wow.
And she was 16.
Yes.
You were 12 and she was 16?
Yes, but we weren't dating.
We
or
weren't
nothing.
dating back then.
Hello.
I waited till I was 15.
But he was 15. We actually started, liking each other. He was 15 and I was 19.
Oh my goodness.
So that was weird. But Louis has always been ahead of his time. He's an
Yeah.
old soul. And so it was funny. Even guys my own age, Louis always the guy that when something's got to get done, he's always been that way. He was, and so I was very attracted to him, and people were like, oh, you're he's going to think you like him, because imagine, no one would think.
Yeah,
I'm
yeah,
like,
that you
no,
actually do.
I kind of do like him. So that was very funny. And we dated for 4 years, and then we got married.
Okay, wait. So you got married when Louis was what?
19.
19. And you were?
I was 23.
23. Wow.
He was a baby.
Super young. He was a baby.
And so the joke is always, I would tell him, hey, you're too young to get married. You better make sure.
Yeah. And our pastor at the time didn't want to marry us because
Because of that.
because of the age, and because I had strayed away a little bit from church and so forth. So he didn't want to. Our youth pastors, who Artie and Louise, were the ones that married us in their church. They had just started off their church.
Yeah.
And I was 19. Zora was 23.
Louis was the bad boy at church.
I can see them.
Yeah.
I can see that. So you guys get married super young and then have kids. How?
4 years later,
Okay.
we had Tommy. And then 2.5 years later, we had Daniel. And then 4 years later, we had Michael. And so
That Michael guy.
Yes.
That crazy guy, Michael.
Okay, so you guys get married, have kids, start this family. Things are going well. I'm sure life, like anybody else deals with
Yes.
things in life. And then many, many years after that, you guys now are at Calvary and your kids are older.
Yes.
Now you find yourselves in a situation that led to you guys being separated for about 2 years, 2 and some change. Walk me a little bit through how that happened. How is it that, how many years later was that? How did you guys find yourselves in that situation? What was even that situation?
So,
You go.
so it was about 2.5 years ago. We
Got back together.
got back together. So 2 years before that, we I don't know, the kids are out of the house. And I think that we've always struggled. This is hard to put 37 years in but I think it was a lot of things. I think that we grew up, going back to when we got married, we grew up at a time where you got married, you left your house, and I became his mother and he became my father. That kind of relationship where we didn't really understand the real, like, husband and wife. Okay. So I think a lot of that has to do with our background. 37 years ago is not like it is now. I mean, I love to see these new couples and how they just have life figured out a little better. And so Louis was a little possessive, maybe at times. I was probably needy. And you want to add to that?
No, you're doing good. You're doing good.
But what happens is that resentment creeps in through different ways. Louis had a problem with his temper. That was a big thing for me. We were never taught how to regulate our emotions, right? And so he was a person that got very angry and raged in a it wasn't physical, obviously. It was.
I had and I'll cut you off here to help you out. So I grew up in a home where it was tough. You had to be a tough man to grow up there, and my father was the greatest man in the world, but my dad was going to raise men. I never played around Juan de Mano, I don't know how you say that, tussle with the three boys. I never did that because my father never did that with me. The men didn't do that back then. So I always had a lot of inner rage, and I fought a lot as a kid. As a matter of fact, one of my best friends, I actually punched him in the throat when we were kids. We were 10 years old, and they had to take him to the hospital. And it broke my heart. I felt so bad afterwards. And I always got scared of the violence the rage brought behind. So as we grow in our marriage and our kids, my three boys start becoming men, it's hard. It's hard because I'm getting old, they're getting bigger. So as a man, you start feeling that impotence, that that they're gonna manhandle me, which they can, by the way. I'll take you. And that starts playing in your mind. I always had rage. But here's the thing. When Zor met me, I was a rageaholic. But we were married for 34 years before the day of the explosion. We'll call it the day of Monopoly for the sake, for the name Monopoly. Before that day, I raged, and we always made up, and it was never physical. It was always raging because I've always been scared of the physical side. So that was an aspect when we got separated that I never understood why. What was it that I was doing wrong?
Because it was never brought up. It was just something that you guys
Exactly.
kind of dealt with.
Yes.
Never.
It was life.
And
Yeah.
I grew up in a house where rage was, I thought everybody raged. I thought everybody was angry
Yeah.
all the time because that's all I ever knew. As our relationship, as the kids got older, it started to bother me. Like, hey, you can't like go crazy every time something happens. You can't. And so I think we also grew up in a time where, hey, you got married like this? That's, what do you want now?
Yeah, go figure it out.
Where that's not right. We're
Almost like
allowed,
there's no room to change.
we're
It
allowed
is
to
what it
grow
is.
and we're allowed to change and we're allowed to say, hey, those things that have been okay for 34 years are not okay anymore.
Yeah.
And so I had gone through a lot of recovery in the sense of I wanted to control my anger and and I felt like he wasn't improving like I was at the time.
Yeah.
You know? And so
She didn't know how to communicate what she was
Yes.
learning and what she was feeling. That's one issue that we've had our entire life until the last 2.5 years that we've been back together.
absolutely.
The biggest issue that we had is that we never learned how to communicate. My feelings were rage and laughter. Funny, I'm laughing, haha, or I'm angry and I want to destroy the world.
Yeah.
And then I learned so many more in therapy. I went to go see Ernie. There's a plug for you, buddy. I went to therapy for 2 years, and I wanted to get better. I wanted to get better because I knew that you and some other people in my life that were very close to me loved me and kept telling me, you're wrong. Yeah. And I knew at that time with that many people that I love and treasure telling me that I'm wrong, I knew that I had to be wrong.
Yeah.
And I think also that I hid behind this rager guy, right? It's very easy for me to hide behind him and be like, he's so out of control. He's so this, he's so that. That for a long time, it was hard for me to see my part in it. And really my part, one of my parts was that I could not communicate because I spent my whole life wanting things to be peaceful. Like, please don't get angry.
Yeah.
Please don't get angry. And then I would do whatever it would take. My kids suffered because of it, because it's like, guys, don't do that. Guys, everything was me
Eggshells.
being in the middle
Walking on eggshells, yeah.
instead of being able to communicate to him, hey, listen, this is how you're affecting the home. You know, I wasn't capable of doing that. It was either we would fight or I would say, I'm going to shut up. And that was very toxic.
Yeah. I love that you guys have even brought up your experiences growing up, because that defines so much of who we are, not just in our marriage, but as people and as how we view the world.
For sure.
And I think I see people today and I feel like they have a much better understanding of the part that plays. But still, I think that we need to live in such awareness that it's good to stop and think about many of the things we are and that we do.
Right.
Really go back to our childhood and things that we learned that we didn't even know we were learning, things that weren't necessarily taught to us, but it was the environment that we lived in.
Yes.
And you talking about, you guys, these are the things that were normal to you that were not normal. And so many people today, we live in dysfunction because it's all we know.
Yes.
And that's our normal. And so it has to be normal,
Yeah.
but it's not. So before we get to, you guys being separated and that, what was the moment? And I love that you guys are both taking part, realizing the part that you played.
Yes.
Because like you said, it's easy to say, because to other people's eyes, in marriage, there's always one that might seem like, because it's the evident, it's the obvious problem. It's
Right.
like you can see it.
Right.
But some of us have things in our lives that other people don't see, and we are a problem as well.
Absolutely.
And so realizing and understanding, like, okay, no, I have things too. It's so important. But what is it that did it, in the sense of what was that moment that you guys were like, okay, no, we can't do this anymore, or I can't do this anymore? How did you get there? Like, what was it?
So we had just come back from
Monopoly.
He's not kidding. He'll tell you about Monopoly.
We had just come from a vacation in Puerto Rico, and he, in my eyes and in my perspective, he was the worst in that vacation. There were a lot of moving parts, and it was not good. We come back from vacation, and he sits across from me and says, "Was that not the funnest vacation?" And I'm thinking, what? And just like, we're living two separate lives. Like, I can't even. So the next day, all the kids come over, because we had been gone for a week. All the kids come over, and they decide to have a Monopoly game. I think Pastor Alex preached about this not too long ago. And things start getting heated, and before you know it,
Over a Monopoly game.
We look like Jerry Springer at the house, you know. Everybody screaming, and I just couldn't believe it, you know. We have grown kids that choose to hang out with us. You know, when your kids are little, they got no choice.
Yeah.
But when your kids are older, and I remember that moment where Louis yelling and screaming, and the kids are, and I come in and I like, what is going on? And he looked at me like, oh, you too. And I thought, oh no, you're crazy. Like, yeah, me too. You're crazy. Like, and I remember my son Tommy packing up our grandson. He was little, he was sleeping, and he packed him up, and everybody's putting their shoes on. Louis ran upstairs, and I just remember my son Daniel put his hand on my shoulder and said, "Mom, you don't have to stay here." And I said, "Daniel, I'm not like a victim here." You know, I was so, you know, and he was just like, he always ruins the fun. And that was, you know, I think Louis did a great job at being the disciplinary, but sometimes the balance was a little off.
Yeah.
You know? And so that day, they all left, and I was in the house by myself, and Michael called me and said, "Mom, I got some chillin' ice cream. I really think you should come to Daniel's house." And I said, "You know what? I'm going." And came back that night thinking he was going to apologize, and he was still like...
Louis was still upset.
He was still upset. He felt betrayed, and, you know...
Louis, you felt like everyone had turned on you.
Yes. Yeah, it was... there's something that goes through a man's mind, my mind, as you get a little bit older, and you're, like I said, the three boys are not three boys. They're three men now. And you start feeling betrayal and all these things that go through your mind that are not real. You start making things up because you're thinking of a reality that is not happening. And that day, the joke over Monopoly was, you know, I wasn't playing the game the right way. I was playing the game to win, but I wasn't playing the game the right way. And it just led to this stupid argument and it took me so long to calm down from it. And yeah, I was the guy that disciplined the kids. All three of them, you know, you see kids in restaurants nowadays that they terrorize a restaurant, and not my boys. My boys sat in the restaurant, they ate, and it was easy for Zor to be we talked about this afterwards. It was always good because she was always the cool parent. You know, she was the parent that consoled. She was the parent that they ran to. And I was the one that always had to lay down the law. Yeah. And even when she didn't want me to, but, you know, in the back of the mind, it needed to be like that, so forth. And I played the role, and I played it very well. And when they all got up and left, literally, there's two jokes here. There's the wind chime and Monopoly. We'll get to the wind chime. No, we're not doing the wind chime. Okay.
We'll see
If
where
you
this
know
goes.
about the wind chime, then you know. So, everybody left. Everybody literally left and left me in the house. And this is June, and 6 months later, we go through our first Christmas apart.
Sorry. So because of this, Zor, you decide that you.
So that was a Sunday. Monday, I went to the kids' house to see my grandkids, or my grandson at that time. Tuesday, we go back to work and we work together.
Yeah.
And so here we are. And he sends me a text. And he says, come to my office.
It was a text.
No.
It was a text.
No, that's how it was.
She's reading it like
It was a
that.
text.
To her, that's how it was.
Come to my office. And
Maybe
I-
it was, hey, come to my office.
It was
Yeah.
exactly like that. Hey, come to my office.
And I said, what is it about work? And he said, no, I want to talk. And I said, Louis, I don't want to talk anymore. As a matter of fact, and I still have this text, I don't want to hear the sound of your voice. And he was like, and you have to understand something else about our marriage. Louis and I never talked divorce ever in 37 years. No one had ever left the house. We're not that couple that gets mad and leaves, and like
Yeah.
that is not us. And so I said to him, as a matter of fact, I'm leaving.
So we had made a deal 30 years before. When we got married at the very beginning, we made a deal that we got upset with each other, and I slept. We used to have this L couch, and I slept on the L couch, in an L formation. And in the morning I woke up and I said, hey, let's make a deal that we never sleep apart and nobody ever leaves the house. The person that leaves the house never comes back. And we have
we did it.
always
That's good. That's
a great
very good.
rule.
Yeah.
Yeah.
It
So
was.
through whatever it happened, nobody ever left the house.
Yeah.
So
Until that day.
Until that
and
day.
then I said, I'm leaving. And so after I said that, I called Lisa and I said, Lisa, can I stay with you for a little while? I don't know.
Lisa's your friend. It's
My friend Lisa. And
Louis, what did you think when she said that? Did you think it was for real?
no.
no, I knew that she was moving over, that she was going to go spend some time over there. But
you
when I
didn't-
saw
yeah.
the things, everything, the house emptied out, it got real.
Yeah.
Well, I just took my clothes, not the house emptied out.
You had
For
you
him,
had to
that
come
was
back for the wind chime.
But anyway, I came and I picked up my clothes, and I remember that night, Lisa made room in the closet. I put on my clothes, and I remember sitting in that room, and the closet doors were open, and I looked at the closet with my clothes in it, and I literally went to the bathroom to throw up. I was like, what are you doing? Like, what are you doing? Louis would tell me, you're going to throw away a 34-year marriage? But there is something that happened in my brain, and I don't know what it was, that just clicked. And I became very numb and very like, I'm done. I'm done. Now imagine, we work at church, and we're, and I knew I was. And the next day, Alex, I remember, had me in his office. Like, what happened? I said, Alex, like, I didn't know what you guys were going to do. I'm like, what happens? Imagine we put you guys through such a situation where, like, we hate it when mom and dad fight, but this was not, for me, it wasn't a fight. For me, this is like, I'm so done that I can't. And I just gonna take this opportunity again to say how much support we got during that time. I mean, I remember Alex sitting with me and just, yeah, it was incredible. And but I don't know what happened. And there are people that want to say, oh, maybe it was God's will that you separated for 2 years. And I will say that was not God's will. Mm-hmm. That was my will. It was my anger, my resentment, I didn't want to do it anymore. And I was avoiding God. I was running a little bit from God. I was like, God, I know you're probably angry at me, but I can't do this anymore. And I can't do it. I can't do it. Yeah. And it was while Louis was running towards God, because now he's alone.
Yeah.
The kids are not speaking to him. I'm running from God because I'm like, this doesn't have a solution. And I wish I would have had more faith.
Also because you felt like at that moment, because I remember having conversations with you, I think you maybe felt at some point that you knew what God wanted you to do. You just weren't ready to do it.
Yes.
And that's a real emotion, you know? And you're talking about, being in church, you guys work at church. It's interesting because, like, I love this story because sometimes people think that because you're a Christian or you work at church or you are at church all the time and you serve at church, that you're exempt from life happening to you.
That's right.
And you're not.
No.
Or people might think, or you may think and put that pressure on yourself that you have to, your life has to be perfect. Your kids have to be perfect. Your marriage has to be perfect.
Yeah.
But having Christian attached to X, Y, or Z does not make it perfect. We're still human beings.
Yeah.
And so even when I see your story, and I debated saying this or not on here.
Here we go.
Here we go. I remember someone making a comment and saying almost like, how are they still here? Like, how are they still at church, like employed at church? Someone that, we're not going to get into that.
Yeah.
And to me, it's like, well, why not?
Yes.
Like, isn't this what the church is? Mm-hmm. Like, this is, we all struggle. We all struggle differently. Some people might be in their marriage, some people with their children. And it's like, well, this is what we're here for, to help each other out and to be there. Like, okay, so someone's going through a difficult time, and because it's not pretty and we're not going to be there for them. Yeah. And it was some interesting 2 years.
Yes.
Because it was 2 years. That's a long time.
That's a long time.
That you guys were still working at church.
Yes.
I imagine also some sort of pressure that was probably over you guys because people look to you, as elders of the church, as people who they would run to for advice. And all of a sudden now you guys are like going through this.
I felt very disqualified. I really did.
But
very disqualified for ministry. And that was me, because no one disqualified me. I was still doing everything I do, but it was me. It was,
So you were at a point where you were running away from what God was probably telling you.
Yeah.
And Louis, how was that for you? Because you, like she said, you started doing the opposite. I think it took you a little bit to get to the opposite.
It did.
But it
took me. I went to go see Ernie, and Ernie said, "This might not be resolved in 6 months." And I said, "Are you crazy?"
Because you had a timeline in your head.
Yeah. Oh, you know me. There's always a timeline.
Yes.
There's always a timeline. So timeline was 6 months. What do you mean? No, this is not going to be finished in 6 months. I said, absolutely not. It took me about a year of weekly therapy, sitting with him, and you and the voices around me that would come in. You invested in my life. We had dinners every Tuesday. Either at my house or...
This was COVID. This was the middle of COVID.
Yeah. This was the middle of COVID. It was I was by myself.
Probably made it even more difficult because we couldn't really go
way
anywhere.
More difficult. Mm-hmm. And there were days that we used to have church online and we used to have staff online, and there were days that I didn't speak to anybody, that when I would open my mouth to speak, I had no voice because I hadn't spoken in 2 days. There was nobody. So it was God put me in a place. I mean, talk about sequestered me put me in a cave from everything. And 2 years. And through those 2 years, I used to call her and tell her, at the beginning, it was, come on, this is over. Let's go. Let's get back together.
Yes, literally like that.
Home
Because you're like, and you couldn't understand why. Because you're working on it.
I'm working on it,
you
man.
know
Look
what's
at
wrong,
me. Yeah.
and I'm doing this, and why are you not here?
No,
So-
the first month he already was like, because
I was a master of
my
therapy.
therapist said, and I was like,
were
oh
rolling your
God,
eyes.
yes, we get it. You're seeing a
And
therapist.
you probably didn't even believe, I think, that
No.
this change was real, or like
No.
what was gonna change this time.
No, I remember that you were seeing real changes in him. And I remember one day coming in your office going, oh, because now, and you were like, stop. And I was like, whatever. I was like a child in that time, you know? And again, thank God for people that were, you know.
Yeah.
I called her. I did 2 years of therapy, and a little bit after 2 years later, with Ernie, I called her, and I said, I don't need you.
Well, say before that.
How many times I did say that?
No, before. When he used to cry out like that and be like, come on, you know, like let's just we cannot put 30 years of marriage in a, and I would say, Louis, one day you're going to be a real whole person, because right now you're not. You're desperate to have us back, because I said, but one day I want you to choose me. I don't want you to go back with me because it's been 34 years. I don't care. I want you to choose me when you're ready, and when you learn how to live by yourself, and now you're in a place where, hey, you know what? I can do this.
Yeah.
I can do my own laundry. I can cook my own meals. I can, you know, stuff he never did before.
Yeah. Louis,
Now.
those 2 years, I know we're getting to the other side of the 2 years, but how was it? How was the journey of realizing things that to you, that you've been doing your whole life and they weren't an issue, but all of a sudden now you're realizing that you need to start changing those things that you didn't even think were a problem? Like, how was that, you know, process, and getting to those 6 months, your timeline, and thinking, okay,
Going
it's not
right
happening.
past it.
Yeah.
Yeah, it was horrible. Because you're not supposed to change this much when you get this old. You're supposed to get cranky, and people are supposed to understand it. But since, like Zor said, I was always so advanced. When I was 19, I was 40. So I had already done the crankiness all these years. So now something else was expected of me. I was lonely, but I was determined that I wasn't going to be the guy that was going to come back and meet his grandparents, his grandchildren, and my kids 20 years later. And then start a life with them, you know, at the age of 70 plus.
Yeah.
So I and Ernie kept telling me, this might not happen. You guys might not get back together. And I always used to think, it can't be. It can't be that is. And that time frame that we were apart, I realized as a man, you know, we got married very young. Very young. I was 23 years old when Tommy was born.
Yeah.
I was 25, 26, and we're 27, and we had 3 kids already.
Yeah.
I had to fend for 3 kids. I thought I had a childhood, but I didn't. I didn't realize it till much later. And now at this stage in my life, I was going through life by myself. And it was horrible. But staying with it and going through it, I came to a place where I made community with guys from church that became my best friends. My brothers and my best friends, you know, and people that, you know, guys that were there for me, for doing, you know, I never did anything before. It was the kids and us, and that's what it was. I learned in that time frame how to find what Zoris was saying, how to find me. And in this process, I fell in love with her again in the sense of, hey, listen, I don't need you anymore, but I want you. I want to be with you, not for any reason. I used to make the bed. We had a king size bed, and I used to make the bed, and I used to go, if I could just have helped her a little bit making this bed through the years, maybe
I wouldn't be making it by myself
all
right
those
now.
things I used to think about. If I could have cooked a meal every once in a while, I would have done some laundry.
But like you've said, sometimes it's not that you don't want to, it's that you've never known how to be
Never.
that person.
Never,
Yeah.
never. And I would say that one of the biggest struggles that we had, if I had to bring it to, was the lack of communication creates the resentment.
Yes.
That it doesn't matter how long time passes, you don't realize it. Our kids grew up in the blink of an eye. We look back and we couldn't believe what had happened. Yeah. And you hear that from us. Aria's not even 2, but it'll be a blink. It'll be a blink. And life, and as much as you prepare for everything, you don't prepare for everything.
Why am I crying with that?
I know.
Yes. Yeah. And I think that this transition of like, you have a house full of kids and you're doing this and you're doing that, and then all of a sudden your kids are grown.
Yeah.
And
now it's just you two.
if the relationship isn't strong,
Yeah.
it's and I think that it's important to say that it wasn't about big things. We didn't split up for 2 years over big things. There wasn't infidelity. There wasn't, you can't put a finger on it, but there was a million little things that failed. Things that, and I know that my part in it for sure was communication, was, I think I have rejection issues. And so when I felt rejection, I withheld love from him. And those little things become big things. And
Yeah, and they do. And before you know it, you're 30 plus years into a marriage, and you don't know
and not
the person.
dealing with things. Well, man.
And you talk about communication. It makes me think so many times we may feel or we may think we're communicating, but 1, we're not. Or 2, we're not listening.
Yes.
And I've seen this so many times that you think just because you had a conversation or you mentioned this or you mentioned that you really communicated. But communication is so much more than that. It's just really being able to finding a safe space. And Alex and I do this now. It's like, I'm gonna tell you, this makes me feel like this. Because sometimes when we say you do this or you make me feel, we're putting the blame on somebody else. And maybe that's not their intention.
So good. Yeah.
And so now it's, hey, this makes me feel like this. Or when this happens, this is what it makes me think or feel. Or even saying, hey, I need a minute. I can't talk about this right now.
Right.
Because before, if you would say that, it's like, oh, that person's so upset and how could you be so angry? And it's like, no, I just want to be the best version of myself.
That's so good.
Gather my thoughts and then respond.
Yes.
And then now it's like, if I'm like, give me a second, it's not offensive. It's not like, it's like, okay, cool. We'll talk about it. But communication, there's so many layers to it.
So many.
Because maybe you could have said something, but he wasn't
listening,
really for what it was. Or you would have said something you weren't ready to hear that way. So 2 years go by, you are in therapy. You at some point,
I was in therapy. I had 2 very bad therapists, and then, Louis was always suggesting for me to go see Ernie. And I didn't want to because he was seeing Ernie, and that was weird. But it was the best thing that happened for me because I felt like Ernie really validated.
When did you feel like you stopped running away from God and from this thought of, maybe this could change, maybe this could be different?
So I remember the day specifically, and it was a Wednesday service. I think it was a prayer and worship service. And I remember looking at Louis from far away. We were starting to go into the auditorium, and he was talking and laughing. And I thought, wow, He looks.
Why is he happy?
He looks whole. He looks happy. What's wrong with him? No, he looks whole. Like he looks. And I remember praying to God and saying, I don't feel that way. I feel like, I remember that day handing it to God and saying, God, this is so heavy. I am exhausted. You know how hard it is to stay angry for 2 years?
Yeah.
That every single time he would say something, I would go, yeah, and this? And what about this? Now you're Mr. This. Now, that takes a lot of effort.
Yeah.
It takes more effort than it is to heal.
That's so good.
To be so, I had to be like the Cubans say, con el cuchillo en la boca, like, what'd you say?
Knife in your mouth, yeah.
You know? And I was tired. I think that's the best way to describe it. I was so tired. And I said, no. You know, I saw a piece in him that I didn't have.
Wow.
And so that day I said, God, I want to be open to what you have. You know my heart. You know how scared I am, because more than anything, I was scared. I remember Louis would call me and tell me, you don't love me anymore? And I hate it when he would ask me that, like, don't ask me that, because I could never say I didn't.
Yeah.
And I would say, I'm going to tell you like Tina Turner, what's love got to do with it? You know, like, it's more than that. It's more than that. And so I think that's when it started to turn for me. It started to really like, and then I remember he asked me, like, we went on a weekend to Orlando to see some friends. And I was like, oh, I don't know. And Ernie said, sit down and have some expectations on the trip. What are your expectations? What are the things you don't want to happen? And it was
So at this point you had already been seeing Ernie and you were working towards
possible.
Okay.
She was working on herself.
Yeah.
She was working on herself, period. That was
You
it.
were advanced already at that point.
No, but that trip to Orlando was the first time that Louis and I sat and said, what are your expectations of this trip? And so I was like, oh, now it's my turn to speak, right? I said, I don't want you to drive like a crazy person. You know, I had a list of things. I can't remember now. And Ernie said, is that okay with you? And he says, yes. And what are your expectations? Louis like, I just want to have a good time. I don't have any, you know what I mean? And we had a really good time. We had a really, like, and then there was this, like, I don't know that I can be without him my whole life. But then fear crept in. I was dealing with the resentment part, and I was fine with that. But then fear.
Fear of, wow, the future of what if
Fear
it
of-
doesn't.
Fear of, like, what if you come back home after all this that you have, all this show you have put on?
But let me tell you something. She was in fear of that. I had come to a place where I had found me and all my craziness. You know, I do have a little ADD going on, which we found out, you know, and I get it. And, you know, if you would go into the house, everything was in its place.
Yes.
You know, it didn't look like a man by himself lived there. And
We learned I was the messy one in the relationship.
so, you know, there's just quirks that I have that I got to get past through that drive me crazy.
Because now you're used to you.
Now I'm used to living with me.
Yeah.
You know, I had turned this room into this room into that. And now I had a routine, which is who I am. I'm a routine guy. And she was in fear that I was going to go back to being the man that I was before. But it didn't dawn on her that I was in fear that she was going to go back to being the woman that she was before, because I didn't want that either.
Yeah.
We
that's so
didn't,
good.
and I said it. I don't want to go back to who we were. Who we were
Didn't work.
didn't work,
Yeah.
and we had to come to a place where, you know, where I learned how to start. Ernie did the chart with all the feelings. I'm like, what is that? All these bunch of feelings. And a lot of times I'm overwhelmed. But I've never understood overwhelmness. I've always mistaken it for anger. Or I'm upset. You're not upset. And I would tell her, man, right now, I am literally overwhelmed. And she would give me my space. And I would just walk away into a room and hang out for a little while. And I would come out a different person. And little by little, it didn't happen overnight. It took another 2 years of us talking and having conversations that we never had before.
Yep.
So at what point did you guys decide to get back together and say, okay, we're going to try? And I love that you're saying this because it's beautiful to see what it's like to have two healed people.
Yes.
Because it wasn't anymore like just the Louis that wanted to have his family, which was great and whatever.
Right.
Or, you know, Zori being right and not wanting to go back to this. But now it's like you guys almost have found yourselves.
Yep.
And even you having certain things, and that's who you are, and embracing that's good.
Yes.
You embracing parts of you, and it's so like now it's two very different people, but good people, healed people now trying to make things work the right way.
Yeah, I remember coming in the house, we decided, you know, he said to me, like, please come back home. Like, we can do this. We can, you know, and I said, Louis, I'm scared. Like, we're good now. We're like, you know, he says, yeah, but I want our marriage back and I want, you know, and I remember.
Wait, so we had breakfast. Hold on, let me cut you off because this is so we had breakfast towards the end. And this was the time that I told her about Ernie. Why don't you go see Ernie?
Yeah.
Go give it a shot. Let's give this a shot. And if after this you still feel the same, then we'll call it quits. But I will have known that I gave it everything I had, and I won't have any regret on it. That's what I suggest. And she did.
Yeah, I did. It took me a little bit, but I remember talking to you about it and saying, you know, and you were like, yes, do something for God's sakes. And yeah, and I just want to say again that during those 2.5 years, whatever years, the support, and you only have that support if you have community.
Yeah.
And I don't mean going to church and you know a bunch of people, and no, community, people that speak into your life. I remember having hard conversations with you, me saying, no, if he wants a divorce, I'll sign the papers right now. And you were like, stop it. We're not talking that.
But you also have to be willing to receive that.
Yeah.
As I feel like there
Absolutely.
might be people who are ready to give that to others and advice and be there for them. And sometimes people are not ready to hear the truth, or they don't want you to speak certain things over their lives.
Absolutely.
And some people, I know that I've had the opportunity in this time frame where I have sat down with some guys that have asked me for some advice because they're going through something similar with their wives, and I realize how God uses everything. And I've told them, I said, right now in your mind, this is what you're thinking. It's not real. It's what's going on in your mind. Nobody wants to be alone.
Yeah.
Nobody ever wants to be alone. And I've told them, I've said, your kids are plotting to leave you the first chance that they get. You just don't realize it. And I've grabbed all this time, which I know the pain that I went through, and so forth. But I know that God is going, and there's a few guys at church that I've seen a change in their life, and big, tough guys that you see them now, and they didn't. And I told them, I said, don't go through you don't have to take the journey, that long journey to get there. You can fix it now, man.
Yeah.
And quite a few of them have, and it's a blessing to see where God has used this, you know.
Absolutely.
And my life now, where I'm at in ministry, where God is using me in different things in our lives. I love the fact, and this is a little. There was a time frame where you and Alex lost trust in me, and I was heartbroken over that and I was always so grateful that you guys stuck with me, because there were so many voices that it was easier to cut bait.
Yes.
And you never did. And to see where we're at today, and the love that you have for me as a father, because I know you do, because I feel it always. I will always be grateful that you guys never gave up.
Yep.
Because where we're at right now, this could have never happened if you guys, it was so much easier to just give up.
Absolutely.
To just walk away.
Absolutely. I remember seeing, having a girl that I knew that had gone through the same thing in her church. And she's like, oh no, they fired me immediately. I was like, oh God. You and Alex were wise beyond your years during those 2 years that we regressed to being teenagers, I felt sometimes. And you guys took on this role that only God knows the wisdom that he gave you to help us through that time. Yeah. Because, you always say that we're so wise, but I'll tell you, those 2 years, not so wise. God used you, both of you, in ways that I can never say.
We love you guys. We love you guys.
We are forever grateful.
I don't want to keep crying.
Yes.
But that's what it's about.
Yeah.
We say we're family, and we are, like, if anything, because we bear the name of Jesus and we wave this flag of Jesus, is the reason why we should be like this,
Yes. Yeah.
It's like, we'll figure it out. And even if it would have ended up any other way, like,
Yeah.
It's what we do. We're here for one another. We're here for each other. And God is God, and God's going to do his work. And he's going to do his part. And he's faithful, and he's good.
Yes.
And you guys are 2 years in after you guys got back together.
Yes.
And I love seeing you guys and seeing how much each of you has embraced your new self.
Yes.
You haven't lost who you are at the core.
Yes.
Because that's not the way God is. God made you to be a certain way. And so you still are those people, just improved and better.
Yes.
And it's a joy to see you guys now, to see your family, to see your kids, your grandkids. Alex and I love it. And seeing everything that God has done.
Yeah. We truly are living our glory days.
Yeah, we are.
Yeah.
And I say that with the most sincere heart. I think this is our best time together.
And the work doesn't stop, because I feel like, because you guys have gone through so much of this and have done such hard work to get to where you are, I think you're very much focused on making sure that you never go back to that place, because it's easy to go back, if you get comfortable. So before we close, because we've been talking for a long time, I'll ask both of you individually, what would you tell someone who might be currently in a situation similar to yours? Again, every situation is so different and so unique, because we're all very different people, very unique people. But someone who maybe is facing this situation, someone who might be either fighting for their marriage or feeling like how you felt, what would you tell them? How would you encourage them?
I would say, own your part. Before, take a moment to stop looking. It's so easy to see what he did wrong. I'm an expert at that, but it was a lot harder to look and say, you know what? I didn't do everything right. I failed a lot of times. There were times I could have been kind. Sometimes we ask, Christian help, and it's, be kind and be graceful. But, if you don't know how to do that in a marriage, you need help. And, yes, I'm supposed to be kind, but why do I want to kick you in the throat?
Yeah.
And that's why you need a therapist. You need to have someone,
a third party.
that is neutral,
Yeah.
that sees it so clearly. I mean, that is, but owning your own part, I don't care what the other person did. It doesn't matter. You own your part, and that's the beginning of healing.
Yeah.
I love that. Louis, I'll ask you a little bit of a different question because I know we've talked about therapy, but how did your relationship with God or your faith help you through those years? And how did, yes, with the help of somebody else, but God, how did you see God, or how did God meet you and help you and change you? And how would you encourage somebody else with that?
Those 2 years that I was completely, I met a pastor, Tommy's pastor, and I had lunch with him when we got separated, and he told me, you need to take a sabbatical, 3, 4, 5 months sabbatical. And this is what we were going through, the turmoil at the church. And I said, man, you're crazy, I can't. And he told me, you need it. And then COVID hit. So it's just, COVID was just for me. So I could be alone with God. And I remember being on the kitchen floor crying out on my knees with the Bible, crying and screaming at God, and God manifesting himself in me. I saw God in those 2 years, and especially the last year, like I haven't seen him in the last 30, because I was so sensitive to God's voice. I started becoming so sensitive to what people were saying. I wasn't listening to what people were saying. I was hearing what they were conveying, which is something that I never did. People would come and explain to me that they were hurt, and I'm moving on to the next thing because I got things to do. I'm on a timeline. And God in that time frame has slowed me down completely. Where now, like you said, the man who I am, that doesn't change because that's who God made me. But my approach, and people don't walk into my office anymore and say, oh my God, we're going to Collazo's office. Now it's like, hey, what's up? And I love being this person that I can enjoy ministry. I can enjoy talking to people and telling them, hey man, so this is my thought behind this. But if you don't want to do it, that's between you and God, And I learned mostly how to communicate. And do you know how many times I've walked and, hey, did I handle that right? And I still say that to you. Yeah. Because I want to make sure that, the old man doesn't rise. Yeah. And I don't give him any footing to come back into the picture.
Yeah. So surrender.
Total
Complete
surrender.
Thank you, guys.
Thank
I
you.
think we could have kept talking for a lot longer, but it's been almost an hour.
Wow.
Oh my goodness.
Thank you so much for being so open, for being vulnerable, for just being willing to say things that, put them out there to more people. Thank you so much. And thank you for always being the best people, the kindest people, the most generous people, the just mom and dad to me. I love you guys so much.
I love you so
and
much.
I love this new chapter of your lives.
Yes.
And I'm enjoying it. The only thing I'm holding against Collazo is that it's been over 2 years that we used to have these dinners and he hasn't made ribs for me. Well, anyways,
part 2.
That's on record. Thank you guys for watching. Thank you for tuning in. I hope that today's conversation helped encourage you, that it stirred up your faith, whether you are living through something like this or not. I think we can all learn from this conversation to have some self-awareness about our lives. Take some deep moment to just look inside and say, okay, why am I this way? What can I change? How can I improve? For us to be willing to surrender to God and say, God, help me in every moment of my life, in every different situation, not just in my marriage, but so many different things. So I hope that through this conversation today, you were encouraged. And again, that God speaks to you directly to whatever it is that you're facing today, whatever this week has for you, to know that as you surrender to him, he will always show up. He will always make a way, and that there's so much more for your life. If you have any questions, any prayer requests, let us know in the comments. Reach out to us. We'd love to connect you with help, with community. Don't do life by yourself. There's so many ways to find community through church, connect groups, whatever it is, and we would love to help you out. And so thank you for tuning in once again. Love you, and we'll see you next week.